Aurora Monroe, or Storm, has gained a huge fan following over the years, and she just might be one of the most powerful members of the X-Men, famously known for her ability to control weather and atmosphere. Storm had quite a traumatic childhood after her parents' death, and she survived by pickpocketing unsuspecting individuals until, one day, she crossed paths with Professor Xavier. Soon enough, Professor X convinced her to join the X-Men, and she honed her powers and grew even more potent with time. Today, we will be delving deep into the thermodynamics and mechanics of her abilities, and tell you everything about her powers. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Understanding Storm's powers. Thermodynamics and mechanics. 1. Storm's control over electrical energy. To kick off this list, we will explore Storm's control over her main energy source, electric energy. Electrical energy can be typically found within phenomena such as static electricity, electromagnetic fields, and lightning. Storm initially wielded a lot of raw power when it came to electricity, and she could channel this energy with acute precision. While most beings register energy when it transforms into light, heat, and sound energy, Storm could sense the electrons flowing through raw energy even before they took another form. In addition to this, Storm could also manipulate the energy levels within the electrons that exist in a spherical shell, which enabled her to strengthen or weaken her lightning bolt attacks. While most beings who channel electrical energy are compelled to make do with the levels of energy flowing through the electrons, Storm could manipulate them to her liking. On this note, Storm could also manipulate the electrical impulses that flow through the human nervous system. Since our bodies are huge masses of atoms, we naturally generate electricity, and Storm would use this internal electricity to fire powerful bioelectric bolts from her hands. These bolts were powerful enough to injure Rogue, Blob, Adaptoid, and even Hulk, among other beings. 2. Storm can also channel electromagnetic energy. Electromagnetic energy is the combination of electric and magnetic fields, and it is supposedly infinite in nature. Storm can channel electromagnetic energy at different degrees, and she often uses this energy in the form of gamma rays. By using gamma radiation and kinetic energy, Storm was capable of several feats, such as deflecting solar flares from the sun, or even using this energy to enhance her other abilities. 3. Kinetic energy is one of Storm's favorite weapons. While kinetic energy typically refers to the energy of an object when it is in motion, Storm often uses it to stir up large-scale disasters such as tornadoes and hurricane-force winds. Among other things, Storm was best known for her control over wind energy. She used it to fly, create wind currents, and even produce powerful jet streams capable of transporting her through the sky. By riding such high-powered winds, Storm could avoid the effects of jet lag and interpret the air mass's shape to figure out what continent she might be flying over. In this way, wind and kinetic energy were a dream pair as they made transportation a piece of cake. Besides creating winds, Storm also used kinetic energy in other ways, such as converting it into air pressure or compressed air. She certainly knew how to have fun with these abilities, and she once even shaped kinetic energy to take the form of her face in the middle of a tornado. 4. Storm's ability to fly around, not just in the air, but also underwater. By manipulating kinetic and potential energy, Storm could not just fly around on her own, but also carry an entire bunch of X-Men through the air. Her flight abilities were quite impressive, and she once overtook Rogue, kept up the same pace as Cannonball, and even managed to match powerful jets with nothing but kinetic energy by her side. In fact, a recent X-Men issue included an instance where Storm flew at supersonic speeds and even broke the sound barrier. While all these displays of abilities mostly take place in the air, Storm is also capable of channeling tidal energy underwater to create tidal waves and surf the tides without any additional aid. In the absence of tidal energy, Storm could create powerful surges capable of pushing water towards the shore, thereby creating high tides and thunderstorms at her will. 5. Storm's interactions with thermal energy. Thermal energy typically originates from the sun, and it results in the rising or falling of temperatures of a thermodynamic system. Storm had the ability to manipulate thermal energy to an extent where she could create a summer environment, or even lower temperatures to cause a blizzard or a flash freeze. Storm's reaction to thermal energy was only an extension of her connection with internal energy, which refers to the total kinetic and potential energy associated with the motions and positions of the object. Besides controlling the weather, Storm could also manipulate the temperature of human bodies, or even objects such as guns. The hypothalamus regulates the body's internal temperature, and Storm could override its functioning to control her body temperature to compensate for external temperatures. She once also lowered the internal temperature of a gun, by about -200 degrees, and she once manipulated the temperature of the phalanx until its organic fibers separated from its technical fibers. 6. Storm is capable of manipulating the sun's energy. The sun and other stars all hold copious amounts of radiant energy within them, and given the right circumstances, Storm can manipulate this energy. While she typically struggles with using her powers in space, she could manipulate the sun's solar corona energy and then convert it into solar winds to fly around in space. In other news, she could also create a 12-force gale and destroy a sentinel by channeling the entire power of the sun, which is no easy feat, even for an Omega-level mutant. 7. Storm can stir up storms with potential energy. Storm could channel the potential energy stored within objects to stir up terrifying storms, ranging from a mere rainstorm to a blizzard or even a hurricane. In fact, Storm uses the potential energy of an entire tempest to enhance her powers in her very first appearance, and she later channeled this energy to manipulate and take control of Shaman's blizzard. In other scenarios, Storm once tapped into a hyperstorm's energy to prevent it from growing any further, and she later channeled the energy of the Trion dimension in its entirety to heal its residents. 8. Exploring how Storm channels chemical energy. Stored in the bonds of chemical compounds, atoms, and molecules, chemical energy is considered one of the most accessible forms of energy. It keeps our bodies warm and repairs cells so that our bodies can keep going. But in Storm's case, she can use her mutant metabolism to generate electrical energy, among other things. She could use her body's chemical energy to alter the state of elements such as air and water, and she once even conjured up a bathing suit out of air. Storm could easily transmute the molecules of her costume into different forms of fabrics, but it has been noticed that she typically refrains from using this ability. This makes it difficult to assess the full scope of her chemical energy-related powers, but we know that her connection to it enhances her awareness of living beings around her. 9. Storm's control over different atmosphere forms or mediums. Before channeling solar, tidal, or any other forms of energy, Storm perceives them in the atmosphere as mediums. These mediums were bound by gravity or electromagnetism, and they took the form of cohesive structures such as asteroids, moons, planets, or even entire dimensions. Storm was not only capable of perceiving these mediums, but she could also control them. Her communion with these mediums enabled her to pick up on sensitive environmental cues, allowing her to detect ocean and wind patterns with great ease. In one such scenario, she fed on the sustainable energy of innumerable stars and planets in the galactic core to gain immense strength, and she could then manipulate space weather, channel invisible energies, transform them into lightning bolts, and even manipulate solar winds. 10. Storm often relies on her subconscious to connect to the biosphere. Now that we have glanced at most of Storm's energy sources, one does wonder how she has such a powerful connection with these forces of nature. As it turns out, her subconscious and instincts are connected with nature, and they sustain her powers and allow her to become one with the biosphere. In this way, she gains access to the universe's inner workings and bends the laws of nature to her will. However, this relationship works both ways, and sometimes these elements can deny her access. Such instances were rare but quite extreme, and in one such case, these elements compelled Storm to give up on her powers entirely. In another such scenario, Doom's Force conjured up a powerful paroxysm by using Storm to take revenge on men, and this incident weakened her to a great extent. The connection between Storm's subconscious and the biosphere was quite intense, and it was always active, which meant that Storm could mostly always rely on these forces to channel energy. Since she could communicate with the biosphere on a subconscious level, most of her actions could be generated instantaneously, even before she could form a conscious thought on the same. 11. Enhanced immunity plays a big role in Storm's ability to keep fighting. While most of Storm's abilities stem from her connection to energy forces, she would not be able to sustain herself in fights if not for her enhanced immunity. She is immune to the effects of any storm, hurricane, or any such weather conditions, and they do not affect her body negatively in any way. And her immunity works closely with the elements that she works with. Of course, she is not entirely invulnerable, and her immunity also depends on the extent of influence she exerts over a particular element. In any case, she does show complete immunity to lightning, even if she's caught off guard in the midst of a lightning attack. She once resisted Thor's lightning hammer and Legion's fire blast without facing any consequences. But we must note that her physical and mental well-being sometimes impacts her immunity. For instance, she once ended up striking her own body with lightning and suffered a great deal of injuries, even though this is something she would typically bounce back from in no time. 12. Storm exhibits perfect accuracy and control over energy systems. Among other things, it has been observed that Storm is gifted with the ability to be perfectly accurate and calculated in her attacks, and she also has supreme control over energy systems. For instance, she can control the oxygen levels in human bodies, freeze hearts, shatter veins, or even send electrical impulses and trigger a violent seizure in her opponent's body. While this is on a human level, Storm can also control elements such as heat, air, moisture, and electricity in the atmosphere, and even alter the state of water. In some instances, she has displayed the ability to manipulate electrons and hydrogen atoms in the air directly, and her precise movements have been of great help in her missions. For instance, she once managed to control the wind with so much accuracy that she could levitate a singular stone to pick a lock, and she once even created a hyper-ionized chunk of air inside a digital camera to erase its memory. 13. How does Storm keep her powers in check? While Storm has some truly fascinating powers, channeling such forces of energy takes a huge toll on her body. She has to exercise great control to keep her abilities in check, as they come at the great cost of endangering her health. To exercise some restraint, Storm adheres to some rules, such as only regulating pre-existing weather patterns and working with what is already available to her. Initially, she struggled with her abilities, and she once decided to create rainstorms to fix the drought in one area, without realizing that the heavy rainfall had killed hundreds of animals. Eventually, Storm came across a tribal woman named Inette, who took her in and taught her to exercise control over her powers. In no time, Storm was managing her powers much more efficiently without accidentally causing any more harm to wildlife or nature. While she would get a bit carried away at times, she made it a point to abide by the orders of nature and refrain from doing anything that might throw off the balance in the ecosystem. For instance, Storm could not only tap into the Earth's electrical potential energy, but also boost her weather manipulating abilities. However, she rarely displayed these powers, as they would be considered a violation of nature. 14. Storm's striking ability to produce lightning force and control pressure. While we have already explored Storm's ability to channel electrical energy, it was revealed that she can also manipulate force and then channel it to produce a shockwave. To put it simply, Storm typically applies force to generate lightning, much like when she used force to blow a gigantic hole in the bottom of the city sewers. Storm's lightning force abilities knew no bounds, and she had managed to create an electrical bomb explosion effect, destroy the X-Jet, and even destruct several heavy metal objects with its help. In other scenarios, Storm used this ability to defend herself by using the lightning force to deflect her opponent's attacks. Storm also had immense control over pressure, and she often manipulated the state of pressure in places to either blow things up or deflect attacks directed at her. She once demonstrated this ability when she buffered the sound of a nightclub by manipulating the pressure and creating a boundary layer over the room's door. While her pressure control is unmatched, it is sadly one of her lesser used abilities, and she mostly just uses it to tweak the weather. 15. Storm has supreme willpower and telepathic resistance. While Storm did not inherently possess a strong will, she developed one over the course of her story arc and learned how to resist any telepathic attack directed at her. She developed strong willpower after facing Emma Frost several times, and even switching bodies with her in one of their face-offs. Since Emma was a skilled telepath, Storm understood how telepathy works after peeking into her mind. Soon enough, she learned how to prevent others from peeking into her mind, and her willpower grew strong enough to dodge even Professor Xavier or Magneto's telepathic attacks. She had faced and defeated some of the most skilled telepaths in the X-Men universe, including Psylocke and Oracle, which was a true testament to her telepathic resistance abilities. Besides dodging these attacks, Storm could also exert control over other minds and abilities, and she had used this power on numerous occasions to take control over Hydro Man's water form, Blitzkrieg's electricity control, or even Shaman's blizzard. In other news, she could also increase the electrical activity in her brain, which acted as a form of static and defended her from telepathic attacks. This static blocked her opponents from probing deep within her mind, and she famously used this ability to prevent the Shadow King from entering her mind in the Worlds Apart story arc. Along the same lines, Storm could create electrical fields to block any mental attacks, and these defenses were typically so powerful that they caused great discomfort to anybody who dared to mind control her. 16. How does Storm amplify her powers to control things on a large scale? While it is typically assumed that Storm's power levels are quite inconsistent regarding cosmic forces, this is not exactly how her powers work. Storm does not have varying levels of inherent power, but rather, these power forces feed her power. and she then focuses on controlling and channeling them. By this logic, Storm could amplify her power to make them work on a large scale by pushing her body to absorb more energies and then channeling them. Mostly, Storm's range of powers depended upon her body and willpower, but we all know that she has a mighty will. In fact, Doctor Strange confirmed this fact and then placed eternity in her consciousness to expose her to the wonders of the universe, a magnificent feat that not everybody can withstand. This was also not her first experience with such great power, and Storm had once bonded with Akante's prophet singer to gain universal awareness and strengthen her consciousness. Are Storm's powers limited to weather? Now that we have explored Storm's abilities in detail, it is safe to say that her powers are certainly not just limited to weather. Her primary ability lies in energy manipulation, which makes it possible for her to control the weather. Admittedly, Storm uses her manipulation abilities in close contact with nature and often uses them to control the weather, but this does not overshadow the fact that she can manipulate energy in more ways than just conjuring up winds and storm. She has certainly mastered her abilities, and Storm quite creatively deploys these powers to survive in extreme temperatures, space atmosphere, and so on. In this way, all her weather control tactics can be explained through a much more versatile power. For instance, her ability to control rain is a mere extension of her telekinetic abilities, and the way she summons and controls lightning can be explained through her energy manipulation tactics. Is Storm an Omega mutant? Can she control the weather on other planets? Officially, there is a lot of chaos regarding Storm's status as a mutant, with different comic book writers picking opposing sides. However, she has an impressive array of abilities, and for all intents and purposes, we can consider her an Omega-level mutant. She does have the ability to control the weather on not just other planets, but entire dimensions. While Storm's powers are often misconstrued as weather control, we remind you that she can manipulate energy, solar flares, thermal energy, and hydrogen atoms, among other things. This enables her to control the weather by manipulating elements related to lightning, wind, rain, and so on. But this is just one of the many ways Storm displays her Omega-level mutant abilities. While she has managed to change the weather numerous times on Earth, Storm's abilities extend beyond our home planet. In fact, she once stirred up a magnetic cyclone to attack her enemies beyond the Earth's stratosphere, and she is capable of manipulating a planet's magnetic fields, or creating tsunamis capable of wiping off entire planets at once. While we can safely assume that she can control the weather and stir some trouble on other planets, Storm has more than proven herself, and she needs no recognition from others to call herself an Omega-level mutant. Marvelous verdict. On that note, we end a journey through Storm's psyche and the inner workings of her powers and abilities, from her super sharp senses to the way she channels thermal, kinetic, electromagnetic, and tidal energies. Storm's abilities are super impressive, and we hope you had fun exploring them with us. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one, and be safe. Thanks, everyone.